Hey guys, my name is Brandon and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you like what you see in here, you're more than welcome to hit the subscribe button so you stay notified every time I upload a new video. Okay, let's get straight on with today's video. Hey everyone and welcome back to Is That More Brandon. So in today's video I'm going to be doing a review to the 7th episode of the Traitors. We are over halfway now, so I don't know actually how many people we have left, but we are almost over halfway and we have lost so many people so far. I can't even remember the order. I probably can, to be fair, but I'm not going to go through that. Actually, let's do a little recap. Why not? It's episode 7. So far, Aubrey was murdered. Sonia was banished. She was a faithful. Kyra was murdered. And then Brian was a faithful. He was also banished. And then we had Ash, traitor, she was banished. And then we had Meg was murdered. And then we had Johnny, who was banished. Tracy, who was murdered. Anthony, who was banished. And obviously we're now about to find out in episode 7 who gets banished again. So, wow, we have a murder and we have a banishment in this episode. So without further ado, I will just go through that now. So at the beginning of episode 7, remember from last night in episode 6, well not last night, but from the previous episode, Miles gave Diane the drink, and obviously that kind of murdered her from the game. And he basically explained he has nothing but guilt, but his job here is done. And Claudia basically explained that the traitors and the faithfuls didn't actually realise that it doesn't work with immediate effect. So she wasn't just completely gone for the game. She was actually still in the game, but obviously no one knew that apart from Claudia herself. So it was just kind of she was dead, but like dying slowly. When it came to breakfast time, Ross came in first. So he was first to breakfast. Diane came in next. And she basically said to Ross, lay off of Zach. Like, I know you want to go for him and I know you're not going to listen to me because I'm your mum, but don't go for him. He's just not even an option at this point. And she said that she adores Paul, but she's just not sure about him at all. Miles obviously came in, said to the camera, kind of like, Diane, are you not dead? And it was quite interesting at this point to kind of see the three boys' reactions. Obviously the three traitors come in and be like, well hang on, I thought that was the plan to get rid of her, but she's still here. So yeah, he came in and he was a bit surprised. And yeah, it was either Zach or Andrew, who was obviously going to be poisoned, who was obviously going to have been murdered the previous night. They both ended up coming through, obviously, and yeah, Molly said it would have been a strange option if either of those two were going to be removed. And Paul basically questioned, kind of thinking, well hang on, did Miles make a mistake? Did he murder the wrong person? Did he do something wrong? And Claudia basically explained that obviously everyone made it to breakfast. Someone had been poisoned, and not explained how. It didn't necessarily have to be with a glass. They did something to someone and that eliminated them from the game, but it's a slow death, and the next mission was to do a slow march to their death, paying their respects shortly. And basically what they had to do was kind of work out what things had happened previously. Was someone kissed in a certain way? Was someone hugged in a certain way? Was someone given a drink? Did someone drink a drink from someone that wasn't kind of made by themselves? And then kind of work out if it was them that was potentially the poisoned. And Diane basically said she got kissed yesterday by someone, it was a little bit weird, and obviously it could be by a drink. And I think here Miles was kind of getting a little bit defensive, and she said, well, it could be anything. It doesn't always have to. It didn't have to be a kiss or a hug or something. It could have been a drink or something else. Paul said to Harry and Molly that his head is fried. He didn't hand any drinks out, so that's kind of put him completely not on the radar. And Jazz and Zach both had a chat, and I think Jazz said that he gave Paul a drink, and they both kind of agreed outside that Paul was a traitor. So I think at this point, Jazz and Zach are not going to go for each other. They both know they're faithfuls, and I think they both agree on the fact that Paul is a traitor. So, you know, this little clan of get Paul out is kind of building up slowly. You've got Evie, you got potentially like Jazz and Zach. So there are people, and Diane, for example, people that don't trust him. Andrew said that the poisoned chalice, a kiss or food could have been what murdered somebody. It didn't necessarily have to just be a drink. And I think here somebody said that there was a drink given. Well, no, Evie, Diane, and Ross were basically explaining here. Well, Evie said that Diane and Ross she'd given a drink to both Diane and Ross, and Diane said that Miles gave her a glass of rosé last night as well. So Evie kind of put herself up in terms of like, oh my god, I gave 2 people a drink, but Diane said that Miles gave her a drink, but that was a very weird way of giving her a drink. There were obviously other people in the room at this point, and she said that she'd have been upset if Evie or Miles gave her that drink, and actually they're the traitor. Charlotte basically said in the kitchen that she basically gave everyone their first drink, and maybe something to do with toasting or cheersing was actually what killed somebody from the game. She just said she was making suggestions. Jasmine kind of shut that idea down, and she said, let's try and not divert from the first clue. The clue is about the chalice, the drinking, so let's try and focus on that. So I guess there's a bit of, not drama, but Jasmine and Charlotte had a little bit of a situation there. And then obviously their task was the low slung walk. So all the housemates, or all the faithfuls and traitors came outside. Claudia was standing there with her horses and carriage, and everyone was dressed in like black and white. And basically what they had to do was correctly work out who had been poisoned before they got to the person's coffin, and then they'd win an extra £7,000 to the pot. They'd guess questions along the way, and if the question related to somebody and somebody got the answer correct, then that person would obviously not have been the poisoned one. And basically the aim of the game was get as many questions correctly as possible, get as many people on the carriage as possible, and then there's less people you have to worry about in terms of who got poisoned or not, because obviously if there's less people to pick from that got poisoned, there's more chance you're going to get it right. If there's everyone left, then everyone will kind of think it's everyone. So yeah, the aim of the game was get as many questions correct and have as few people left as possible, and then it makes it easier to work out who actually got poisoned, and then they can kind of think, hang on, this person was given a drink, or that person gave me a drink, and that sort of thing. Obviously the traitors knew, and Claudia basically explained, let's try and work out if you can see behind those crocodile tears. Jasmine had a shield from the previous night, so she was straight on the carriage. She was the first person going through to the next night. She wasn't going to get murdered, and she basically said she needed the money. Let's try and build this prize pot. So although someone is getting eliminated from the game, let's try and win that money first, add that to the pot, and then worry about that later. And the first question was the players who are safe were those who had shields in the first mission, which was Jazz and Harry. They were both obviously safe. Harry basically said to the both of them, Miles gave drinks to Diane and Evie, and Charlotte also gave drinks out. So kind of planting in their seeds that Miles or Charlotte could potentially be the traitor, or, you know, have done that traitor's duty. The next question was those who received 0 votes at the round table. Oh no, sorry, those who received votes at the round table on yesterday's vote. And there was a whole choir with like veils and almost like wedding dresses and, you know, black and white outfits. So Zach, Andrew and Ross all received, I believe, 1 or 2 votes at the round table. So they were all safe. And Ross basically explained here that obviously now he's safe and he can see his mum, Diane, is still there. He's a little bit worried about her. The next one was a shrine to Tracy. And the player that was safe is the person who Tracy said that she would leave everything to. They said Diane. That was the incorrect answer, which meant Diane potentially could have been poisoned. Harry explained to the rest of them that Molly and Evie have never taken a drink off someone. Obviously Evie gave drinks to people, Molly kind of was just there, but neither of them ever took a drink from anyone. And the next question was who has never received a vote at the round table. So Molly, Charlie, Charlotte and Miles were the 4 that had never received a vote, so all 4 of them were safe as well. So we found out it was either Diane, Evie or Paul. Now we all know it's Diane, and we all know that it couldn't be Paul because obviously he's a traitor. Evie gave out 2 drinks, which I think is why she was there. And one of the 3 of them obviously had been poisoned. We obviously know it's Diane, and Diane whispered to Evie, if he dies it's Jazz, and if I die it's Miles. So yeah, that's basically what she said to Evie. So I think Evie clearly heard what Diane said, and I guess kept that information for herself. And I think she also heard there was a conversation between Diane and Paul, but didn't obviously didn't obviously hear, or she maybe did hear, but is, you know, pretending that she didn't hear, just to kind of, yeah, stir things up a little bit or get things a little bit more interesting. And Ross explained that it's obviously quite upsetting for him because potentially in this part of the game one of his parents could be murdered, and for Evie, she explained that being in the coffin was obviously a horrible experience. What the players then had to do was vote for who they thought had been poisoned by giving them a rose, putting the rose in their coffin, and the player who had the most roses was obviously the group's final choice. If they got the choice correct, they got the money to the prize pot. If they got it wrong, that person would still be eliminated from the game, but they wouldn't have that extra 7,000 added to the pot. Paul explained he also tried to make his leg shake a little bit, to make it seem like he was a bit nervous, had a little bit of a nervous shake. So yeah, we went through each person and who they thought. So Jazz thought potentially it was Evie, and the traitors would do that to obviously confuse the group. Harry thought it was Diane because there was already little discussions going on within the group. Molly thought it was Diane because she's super clever and probably intimidating to the traitors. Miles said it was Paul because he had a predominant drink. Zach thought it was Diane. She's an obvious target. Ross thought it was Diane, and said it would be silly to poison Paul. And obviously, just as he went back, his mum basically managed to say goodbye to him and obviously look up at him as well. Charlotte, Charlie, and Jasmine all put a rose in Diane's coffin, and Andrew said it was Paul. He did get a drink off of one person, so potentially, yeah, it could have been Paul that was poisoned as well. In the end, we found out it was Diane, so she was poisoned, she was out of the game. Obviously Ross was really, really upset, the rest of them kind of looked upset, and Claudia said, you've lost a brilliant player, because obviously, you know, she was the oldest player in the game and she was probably one of the strongest players, just because she's had that life experience. She was good in that running game the night before, so, you know, they lost another faithful there. And Ross explained it was a massive loss for the team, and they definitely need to get one of the traitors. And then Diane, basically, her goodbye message was the traitors are playing a blinder of a game, and Ross basically explained that he was going to promise to his mum, he was going to keep the secret of her being his mum, and crack on further in the game. So unless you fully trust someone, you can explain that little secret, but again, if he does spill that to anyone, whether they're a traitor or whether they're faithful, he's going to then be questioned, well, why didn't you mention that at the beginning? Why did you hide that secret? Kind of like with the boyfriend and girlfriend from last year. Paul was having a chat with Jasmine, Ross and Jazz, and said that Diane basically told him that it was Miles, and Ross added that he was looking a little bit shifty, and definitely revenge will be taken, obviously in, you know, remembrance for his mum. Miles was then having a chat with Charlie, Charlotte and Andrew, saying that the traitors want us to think people gave drinks to people, so because someone's run with the idea of it's got to be a drink, they're kind of forgetting the fact that it could have been a kiss, could have been a hug, could have been a touch, could have been, you know, getting them to say a certain word or a certain person's name. So he was kind of diverting it through that way, which was again quite smart, but I guess he was one of those that was giving people drinks, so he's definitely got himself in the spotlight there. And then again, I think here Zach was having a chat with Molly, Evie and Harry, and basically said that Miles gave a drink to Diane, so he's definitely 100% a traitor. I think Zach here, definitely confident that Miles is a traitor, and I think he basically said along the lines of like, if Miles wasn't a traitor, if he was a faithful, then there'd be other people he'd be obviously coming after, and it would be a little bit upsetting. Evie also added that Miles could be a traitor, and Harry said that Miles is always very quiet around the round table. So again, Zach, Evie, Harry kind of teaming up here. Harry knows that Miles is one of the traitors, but I guess here, similarly to Ash, he's weak, he's made a bit of an oopsie, he kind of, you know, made it a little bit too obvious, so yeah, maybe it's now his time to go. And yeah, Miles basically said he's never had his name brought up before, so now that his name's kind of going around people's mouths, he's a little bit nervous. Ross also said that Diane had told some people that it was Miles, so he kind of shared that with a few of the other players, and Harry said that it's definitely a smart play to go for Miles, get him out, you know, get a traitor out of the game, and we can, you know, continue the game. Molly and Charlie both basically said it would destroy their soul if Miles was a traitor, and actually at this point, Miles was standing outside listening to the conversation, so he heard Harry kind of having these open discussions with people saying, oh, I don't really trust him, and da-da-da. And Ross basically said, yeah, Diane said to Paul that it was Miles, so, you know, Ross is kind of bringing his mum back into it, and that it was Paul that was having that discussion with Diane, but obviously Diane's not there to speak. And Paul was going off something that, you know, has information that's just been given to himself. This is when Miles came in, and Harry basically said to the camera, it was a little bit awkward because obviously he's walked in and they're all talking about him, and he said it feels like people are barking up the wrong tree. That is the Traitors' agenda. They want people to target someone because someone's had an idea and you just run with it, rather than actually thinking, well, it could have been something else, and it could have been someone else, and it could have been somewhere else. But all we know is Diane's gone. They have to think who gave drinks to Diane. Miles was one of them, Evie was one of them, so they're potentially two that could go. And Ross basically said that Paul seemed to have been pushing the agenda of it being a drink. So again, Ross kind of has Paul on his mind now as well. At the round table, Ross said his gloves are going to be off. Harry said Paul was probably going to go for Miles. Miles said he's definitely going to be in the hot seat. And Paul basically said the situation is going to be tough. The round table is going to be tough. Miles is going to give him a little bit of heat, but at the same time he has to fight back. We found out the prize pot was £56,550. And Paul started off, I think Miles and Paul basically both spoke at the same time. Paul was just that little bit quicker. And he said that Diane said that if she died, Miles is definitely the traitor. And also said, well, Evie was there. She also had the conversation. And then Evie jumped in and said, well, I didn't hear the context of the conversation. I just heard people's names, but I didn't actually hear anything about the conversation. So I think here, if Evie did hear, this is the best time for her to pretend that she didn't hear. You get Miles out, or potentially put a bit more spotlight on Paul. If she says, actually, yeah, Diane said da-da-da, or I heard Paul say da-da-da, then it comes back onto her why she wouldn't have brought it up. Or, you know, it kind of then puts her in the spotlight of, well, actually, Evie, it could have been you as well. So the fact that she said, I didn't hear, keeps her as a closed door, doesn't give Paul enough evidence, and Miles is then like, actually, Paul, could have been you. You know, you're having these conversations, making up that certain things were being said, but Evie's just said she didn't hear the conversation, and also Jazz's name was pulled up for some reason. Miles explained that it could have been the drink, and that's all they've got to focus on at the moment. Harry said that people that were giving multiple drinks out were obviously Miles and Evie, and she basically said, well, what if it was nothing to do with the drink? And Ross basically explained if Miles is faithful, the spotlight's then going to go on Paul. So I guess here, Paul is trying as hard as he can to get Miles out so that it's a traitor, so that Paul looks like the hero, when actually he is also a traitor, getting rid of someone who he knows is potentially the weakest out of those three. And Paul basically explained, if Miles is faithful, you can absolutely banish me tomorrow. You know, I've made my mistake, I'll hold my hands up, whatever. As if like, you know, I'm going to be wrong, but absolutely is going to be right. And Paul basically said about Miles that he's never gone for the shield, he's never been nervous at breakfast, and he always seems to deflect from the conversation. And then Miles basically explained, well, actually, if giving Diane a drink is the crime, then obviously that's a shame. But it's obviously come from Diane herself, so she's not really here to vouch for that. So there's kind of evidence that isn't really evidenced, basically. Harry quickly whispered to Zach while this weird conversation was going on, and he basically said to Zach, it seems like two traitors are going at each other. So Zach said, yeah, definitely, I agree. So Zach and Jazz have already had a chat about Paul. Harry and Zach have now had a chat about Paul and Miles, so whoever the two of them goes, they're going to probably team up and go against the other one as well, because yeah, there's two traitors that just trying to knock each other out, but it's making them both look even more guilty. And then Zach also joined in here and he said, look, it looks like one of you is trying to sell the other one out, and now you're trying to make it look like you're innocent. So Paul's trying to basically say, like, get Miles out, he's the traitor, da-da-da, and trying to make it look like he's innocent. Okay, Miles was a traitor and Paul looked like the hero, but is he doing that because he knows Miles was a traitor, or is he doing it because he genuinely is a faithful? That's what's probably going around people's minds. And he basically just said, again, from the dungeon situation, out of Paul and Meg, why didn't the traitors kill him? The fact that he's so popular, the fact that he's so confident, why were the traitors stupid enough to keep him in the game when they know he's got so much power? Again, kind of planting that seed in people's heads of, well, a traitor can't kill a traitor and you can't kill yourself. So yeah, it's one of those that Zach again has just like pumped up, and again, he's not in the spotlight this time, he's more in the kind of leader light of like sharing things and being brave. This is what Ross said, and this is what Ross said to Jazz as well. If you've got an idea, and if you've got, you know, an inkling that it's someone, you have to run with it, because if you don't catch them, they're going to catch you before you can even speak up about it. Then they all did their votes, and you heard Paul whisper under his breath for Diane. kind of making out he was doing it for Diane by going for Miles. And in the end, Andrew had 1 vote, Paul had 2 votes, but with 9 votes, Miles was eliminated. He revealed he was a traitor, he was banished. Ross said that it was very, very sneaky. I think Zach jumped straight on Paul, kind of started laughing and giggling and, you know, being really excited because they got a traitor out. Charlie said well done to Paul. And Andrew and Charlotte were both comforting Paul, and Charlotte basically said Miles was very, very clever in that game. Ross said to Paul as well, you're the reason we got a traitor out of the game, and basically said that he feels like Paul is faithful and has avenged his mum's death, and, you know, solidifies the fact that he's definitely a faithful. Charlie and Charlotte also agreed. Harry also said to the camera that Paul crying, getting all emotional is like he's doing a little bit too much. But then, yeah, I think Zach and Jasmine were listening into that conversation. Yeah, Harry basically said that it seems like Paul's doing a little bit too much. So Zach and Jasmine listening in, kind of being like, you know, I don't know what to do with this information. Do I believe Harry and, you know, this guy is doing too much, or is it just he's genuinely emotional and, you know, it's a very difficult situation for him to have been part of. Evie said that there's still so much suspicion about Paul. There's a lot of suspicion about him, and she has had suspicions throughout the entire game. And she said maybe it's a soft launch into saying it was Miles, and that maybe days ago he knew it was Miles, and now he's gonna, you know, come back with even more strength. And Charlie basically said on the first night everyone was confident. And Charlie basically said for the first night everyone was confident and everyone kind of, you know, went for what they thought. Zach kind of looked at Jazz and was like, well, apart from you. Jazz kind of went, well, apart from me. And then Paul mimicked Jazz saying, well, you know, Miles, you're definitely not a traitor. So they all had a little giggle there because obviously Miles was a traitor. And Jazz kind of was like, oh God, like, don't remind me of what just happened. And then Harry and Paul, obviously the 2 traitors, met each other in the turret again, and they had a decision to make. Paul basically said they had to get rid of a traitor because there was obviously so much evidence, and if they didn't get rid of Miles at the time that they got him, he could have potentially come after the 2 of them, or Paul would have been on the radar, he would have then been knocked out. Harry's fine, but he would have then probably gone against Paul. So they did the right thing at the right time. And Claudia basically explained to the 2 of them they could either recruit another player to join them as a traitor, or they could murder another faithful and just have another night, just the 2 of them. Obviously, the player that they want to recruit can accept or refuse. So if they refuse, they're probably going to want to kill that person. Otherwise, they'll start spreading rumours of who they think could have recruited them. Or they might go and tell other people, oh, I was recruited to be a traitor. And Paul basically explained here he doesn't like bringing in new people. And Harry said there'll be more money if they have a 3rd person, because they could bring that person in as bait, get rid of them, and there'll be more money for the other 2, if that obviously is the plan and if that does actually happen. And they basically agree that they need someone to take the heat off of them. Harry said he needs someone strong to get them to the final, and then obviously can get rid of them. And they kind of started discussing about 4 different people. So Harry thought Zach, because it could be easy to get him to switch teams. Jasmine has a lot of heat on her already. Ross also has a lot of heat. He's 100% on trying to work out who the traitors are. And he's guessed incorrectly 3 times. So for him to now actually be a traitor would be quite interesting. And Andrew, again, already has eyes on him as well. So when Claudia came back in, they decided they were going to recruit, they weren't going to murder, and that person was going to join their team immediately. So it was either going to be Andrew, Zach, Jasmine, or Ross. So I think all very good decisions. Andrew's got a bit of heat, he's a bit quiet, but he can speak up. Jasmine, Zach, I guess, are friends. So even if one of them does end up becoming the traitor, they're going to probably still try and have the other ones back, but not as closely, because Harry is going to have that closer connection with one of the 2 of them. If they do bring in Zach, Zach and Harry will be close. If they bring in Jasmine, Jasmine and Harry will be close. Again, will that new duo of the traitors then turn against Paul? I don't know. Or will Paul work that out and then try and split them up? Maybe get rid of Harry first and then the other one, or the other one first and then Harry's back with Paul. So not too sure. And then also Ross is an interesting one because his mum was a faithful, he was a faithful, and now he's switching teams. Is he going to want to do that, knowing that the 2 people that were traitors actually got his mum out of the game? So I don't think he's going to want to do that. Claudia came back in. Obviously, they had however many minutes to discuss, and Paul basically said after a long deliberation, we definitely want to recruit, and then basically said to each other, now we wait. And Harry basically said, we're bringing this person in as bait, and they don't know that yet, with Paul replying, what if they say no? So I think here, the fact that Harry automatically thinks this person's coming in as bait. If they do say yes, they're going to probably have an idea that the other two have got close, so they're going to probably have been coming up with their own plan, maybe not trusting either of them at all, just because of what they've done to Ash and obviously what they've done to Miles, because I'm sure they'll remember, oh, actually they both went against Ash and they actually both went against Miles as well. And again, from what Paul said, again, if they do say no, they're going to know, obviously they're 100% faithful, and they're still not going to know who the traitors are, but they'll work out who's giving them weird stares, or who's, you know, changed the type of conversation they're having with Harry and Paul, and, you know, kind of be like, well, hang on, did you recruit me? Is that why you're being weird with me? So I have no idea what to expect, but that's episode 7 completed. If you did enjoy my review, don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. And until episode 8, I'll be seeing you very soon. And until then, thank you for watching and goodbye.